Yo, what is up everyone? This is Arcando. Welcome to another brand new tutorial today. I'm going to show you how Oddcube and I made our cover on Cinema that we released a couple weeks ago with Chris Jobe on Future Generation. The support has been super great. You guys have been like streaming it, sharing it, and overall the love on the track has been really amazing. So thank you guys so much for this. And after we received all the positive feedback and support, Sean, also known as Oddcube, um, and I were like, hey, let's just do a tutorial on this track since we already did a tutorial on our Graveyard remix. Let's do another one to end this year. Basically, for this track, Sean made the break for the cover and I made the drop. So what we're going to do first is Sean is going to explain his part, and then we're going to go back to my part where I'm going to explain the drop. And without further ado, Sean, take it away.
All right, what is up, guys? So now we are inside the project of Cinema. I'm just going to go ahead and play just a small bit, just the first half of the break, and then I'm just going to go over everything.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie. 1,000 endings. You mean everything to me. I never know what's coming. Forever fascinated. Hope you don't stop running to me, 'cause I'll always be waiting.
So that is just the first half before we get to the plucks and the build-up. First, we have Chris Jobe's vocal. So let me go ahead and solo his and then turn on all these automations. So Chris Jobe's vocal is just insanely clear, just insanely good. This guy's just next level.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie.
Just super clean. And then we have all the vocal chops. This is just kind of what just drags the track, honestly. So just a lot of ambience. And as you can see, there's a number of things on here. And the main thing is to really cut out all the low end out your vocal. So there's not any mud flying around inside the reverb. I just go ahead, and I don't know how to use volume. I just do it until it sounds nice. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cut out the low end again. And then I use this fat filter. This is a free filter from SoundSpot. It's just a filter. That's all it is. So without it, it's good, but it's a little still too bright. So I wanted it a bit more muffled. Actually, I don't even know if it did anything. I think it did something. And then a compressor. Another parametric EQ to take out more of the brightness. And then I think this balances for panning later on. And then from here, of course, the vocoder for Chris Jobe.
I never know what's coming. Forever fascinated. Hope you don't stop running to me, 'cause I'll always be waiting.
Just to, oh my gosh, just to make it sound just way better. Then let's see. Then after that, I add this in a lot of my tracks just because it fills up the space really nicely, just gives it this really airy feeling. This, I believe, is just let's see, I think it's a bunch of pads. Yep, it's just a bunch of pad layers. Without all the processing on the bus. It's a really soft saw, I guess you would say, but I just filter it a lot. Of course, parametric EQ, cutting out the low end. I'm a Fab Filter Pro Q to cut out the high end, and I use the SoundSpot Fat Filter again. And then I think it was just this really odd sound here, so I just cut that out. A Fab Filter Saturn just to spice it up with magic mastering. And then I cut out the low end once again. And then we have this bubbling atmosphere. This is actually in a pack. I just liked the sound just for this additional filler, I guess you would say, and it just fit really well. And then right here is these, let's see, what are they? Beep. Yeah, so they're just these little beeps basically. So they go ahead, they pan left and right just to give it a bit more spice. And then we have a small ARP. And I believe this one is Spire. Oh no, this is Hybrid. So this is actually a pretty good plugin in my opinion. If you just want additional sounds just to fill up whatever is in your track, not as a main sound. I don't think it doesn't have any like solid main sounds, but it's good for just these filler sounds. A lot of pads on here, a lot of interesting sounds. I think it's only like $10. I only paid $5. I think it was on a sale. I think it might be like $15 right now. But if it comes around the sale for $5, I would say just get it. And then from here, it's going to be these cinematic drums. I really like these. I had fun making these. A lot of this is from Looperman. This was a long time ago, back when I was Wolf Snare, and I used these samples, and then now I just went ahead and combined it with Virtue's drum loop, Cashmere, cinematic drums, and I'll play them separately so you can kind of hear what it's like. Cut out the low end and really cut it out right here because there was a lot of mud. And then with this one, again, cut out all the low end and really dipped right here because it had a lot of mud right there. And then the beef of the drums comes into this one. And I just took down the just the sub part really, just to clean it up. And then I just have the top end. Let's see. And then after that is the FX. I use a lot of FX in my track. I think it fills up. I think it's just an easy way just to make it sound different than the other person. Using like drones, downlifters, whatever you say, natural elements. So I'll go ahead and play them at one time. So as you can hear, it really brings the power, brings the life to the break. So just to break it down real quick, let's see. So we have some vocal textures. Okay, guys. So then after that, we're going to go ahead and listen to these natural sounds. And then we have a lot of other stuff, some impacts. And then we have here just so, and I don't really plan these. I just drag and drop, and whatever sounds nice, I use it. So you see just a lot of atmosphere, and I just love doing that in my tracks because it just brings so much energy. Without them, it will sound really dry. So that is really one of my biggest tips is to add FX into your track. It doesn't take that much CPU, at least on my computer. I just think it makes it a lot more professional. And then we have, of course, some more impacts here. And that is it for the FX. All right, guys, so after that, I'm gonna go ahead and play the other half, and then we can just review that part as well.
Always be ready. You are a cinema. I could watch you forever. Action, thriller. I could watch you forever. You are a cinema, a Hollywood treasure. Love you just the way you are. A cinema, a cinema. A cinema.
All right, awesome. So then we're going right back to the vocal ambience, and I'll just go ahead and play them for you. So it's just everything I did here is all trial and error. As you can tell, that's my technique. It's just trial and error, honestly. Just taking them, reversing the synth. Reversing the vocal, adding reverb, filtering it, and then just chopping. And that's how I got these melodies. So then we'll go ahead and move on to the plucks. I had to export these. This is just Serum, but I had to export them because it was killing my CPU. And then this layer over here is actually underneath, and this is Spire. And then after the plucks, we have the Skrillex, basically replica. And Mark did a really good job of replicating that. And then we have the classic Reese bass. But so what I did is I used a wave shaper, parametric EQ, took out a little bit of that additional sub and those really high frequencies. And then I used Omega just to boost it. And then this parametric EQ, as you can see, there's a lot of cutting and dipping here. And then we have repeat the small arp again. It's just the key down sample bell. I use this all the time. It just always sounds nice. So, and then we have, looks like we have some claps. We have the kick. This is, you can just literally type this in Splice and find this kick. It's a really good kick. So I use it pretty often. And then we have the cinematic drums again. And then we have the hi-hats once again. Crowd cheers going up. We have the same effects. Nothing is new here. And then let's go ahead and jump inside the build-up. It is the Reese bass, of course. You have the filtered, another filtered like a saw. We have this bubbling atmosphere. The claps that we're in, the kick that's building up, a snare. A sunny snare. find out on splice, and then a south side trap snare. And then let's see, we have some more fills. And again, it's just a bunch of different samples, and then I just kind of turn it to make my own. You know, just a bunch of percussions, trial and error, just cutting, adding, and then making something cool. So let's go ahead, the build effects. And the only new thing is the risers. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the second break. I'm only going to show the new things that I added so we don't repeat the same things that we went over. We have this whole new part that got added in, and a couple of drums and some effects. So I'm going to go ahead and play it for you. But it starts getting different right here at this part. And then we have a this new sort of ARP. We have a new ARP over here. This one is, yes, Serum. I'm sorry, it is Spire again. And then we have this last part, which I really like. And then we have the saws. And let's see, I don't think I did much for these. So it's actually just one saw. Because I didn't want it to be super big, you know, I just wanted to give it the feeling. And this is a hybrid. And then here I went ahead and stacked, I think just a mono saw, honestly. Yeah, so it's just 2 layers. And that was a saw that I made myself, and then, of course, did a lot of processing. Sounds really bad without the processing. And what I did is I cut out the low end, used OTT, then I used that FabFilter Saturn, which is saturated in color. And then I went ahead and cut out the low end again, cut out this really high-end crisp, because that's going to be added back into the master, and I didn't really want it to like kill people's ears. And then another OTT just to spice it up a little bit more, Camo Crusher, more beef, cutting out the low end again, and then using a cutoff. So what I did is I automated the cutoff, so every time these first hits came in, and then I went ahead and opened back up the filter when this part came in. And it just gave it so much more power, instead of just being powerful throughout the whole thing. And then we have the Reese bass. And after that, we have, oh, I think these are just a kick and then claps. just some snares, and then it looks like we have some fills here as well. So then I go ahead and I add these FX. These are the same ones from earlier. They're just chopped up. And then the buildup is the same, except the last part we go ahead and we just do a pitch bend. And that is all for the first and second break. I really hope you guys learned something. And please, if you have any questions about the break that you'd like to know, please just go ahead and DM me and just hit me up.
Yo, so before we actually move on to the drop, I quickly wanted to run through my elements in the break. So the piano, how I process the vocal, and some other small elements that I added. So the break sounds like this.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie. 1,000 endings. You mean everything to me.
So yeah, there are just a couple elements in this break that I added. Most of it is obviously made by Oddcube, Sean. But I added, for example, this piano. Just really beautiful piano, and it actually really works well with the vocal.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie. 1,000 endings. You mean everything to me. I never know what's.
So yeah, the piano is super simple. It's just Contact, the Grandeur, literally the go-to piano for me for all my songs. And on this there is an EQ, and that's literally it. Then we have the vocoder in the beginning.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie. 1,000 endings. You mean
This is just, as you see, Manipulator. It's probably, I think, my favorite vocoder plugin. I pitched the vocal with 12 semitones, and then I formatted down with 1, a little bit of harmonics, or less harmonics actually, and make sure it's on polyphonic, so then you can actually play multiple notes at the same time. As far as processing goes, there's literally only an EQ, cutting out a little bit of the high end. It's just a high shelf, and cutting out all the low end, and a pretty big OTT with 23% in the depth range. For the vocal, I use a EQ, just cutting off all the low end. I use a CLA2A. I think, yet again, this is one of my favorite vocal compressors. It's a replica of the Teletronics compressor, and it really works great. It's just 2 knobs, gain and peak reduction, and that's it. It really works great for vocals. There is a reverb on it, nothing too crazy either, and Echo Boy Jr. This is for the delay, set to 1/8 wide, a little bit of mix, a pretty long feedback, set to studio tape, and it gives it this effect.
I could watch you for a lifetime. You're my favorite movie. 1,000 endings.
To recreate that Skrillex vocal effect delay, I did it myself manually, because the original vocal, I think it's this one. The original vocal has so much delay on it, as you can hear in this one.
You mean everything to me.
And I was just like, I really want to get that same feeling with it. So what I did is, at this part, for example,
To me.
the to me, I want to get another delay on that. And that sounds like this. And All it is if I take off all the effects, it's just a dry vocal from Jobe, but it's completely wet. Like, even with the delay, it's set to 100% wet, so the dry signal doesn't actually come through. And that's why it's not phasing with the original signal, because there is no original signal, if that makes sense. On this, there is a little alter boy that's off. I don't know why this is on here. There's a J37. This is a really, really, really awesome analog saturation plugin, or like a tape saturator. I think this is from Waves, actually. Yes, it is. There's an EQ, cutting out all the low end and a little bit of the high end. And then there is a CLA2A compressor that's, yet again, compressing the vocal. And there is a reverb on it. And that's how I created that like delay effect in the vocal, to match it just like with the original vocal. Then we have the Reese bass. This is just the main one I always use. I'm not gonna explain this one again because it's literally explained in all my other videos. It's just a simple Reese bass. And then we also have this sound. Just playing one note, the harmony of the chords basically. I made it super thin, actually, without the tremolo effect and the EQ. It sounds like this. Like just a really crappy sound, actually. And I put a tremolo effect on this, and this is what creates that like gator stutter effect. And then with an EQ, just cutting out literally all of the high end and boosting a lot around the 500 hertz, because there's the main tonality of the synth. As you can see, I boosted it with almost 12 decibels. I really wanted it to be like upfront in the mix. And yes, so those were actually the things I added in the break. So now we can actually move on to the drop and the piece of the build. So yes. We're gonna start off with the drums, and the drums, they sound like this. And the drums are actually super basic, so I feel like kind of want to go in, through the percussion part pretty fast. There is a clock tick fill, and then mixed with these other percussions that are in the pre-drop fill. Super simple. It's just like some Cashmere stuff, some stuff I used in Wonderwall. Then we have the main drop kick, which is the one I use in Rude, Youngblood, Graveyard, basically in all my tracks with Oddcube, because this kick just works perfectly with the sub bass and the basses I use for our tracks. Super simple. And then later we also have this like little kick fill. Just really simple stuff, just the kick being pitched up with 23 semitones, so it almost becomes like a tom, and then like a triplet kick right here. Nothing crazy, nothing too special. As far as the snare goes as well, we have just my main drop snare, also the same snare I used in Rude, Youngblood, All the Right Moves. Same snare, just really punchy, sort of hip-hop-ish snare. And then we have this trap snare as well, just to add a little bit of more high end to the main snare. And then as far as the percussions go, it's a lot of different stuff. We have like this camera flash from Hex Cougar, which is not really a percussion, but more like an uplifter effect, which fits perfect to kind of like accelerate the percussions a little bit. Just a great technique to add more energy to the drop without adding like a lot of different elements. This basically acts like a small riser, to be honest. We have like this guitar percussive tonal loop. Nothing too crazy as well. Hi-hats and toms to kind of fill it up. And then also the crane loop. Super basic stuff, like legit. Then for the second part of the drop, it's just like these shaker loops. And a hi-hat loop. Really, really simple stuff. So those are the drums, to be honest. And then we move on to the sub bass of the drop, and that sounds like this. This is yet again the same sub bass I used in my other tracks. But if you haven't seen the other tutorials yet, let me just go through it really, really quick. Serum patch, and basically it's two basic shapes and a sub oscillator, and there is a compressor on it, a multiband compressor, to add like the really fat grittiness to it, distortion to kind of smoothen the grittiness, and then a filter to cut off all the high end in the sub. And that's really it. That's basically it. There is a sausage fattener that's fattening up the bass. There's an R bass that adds even more bass to it and really accentuates the 43, like 40, 50 hertz. There is a EQ that's kind of like balancing the sound a little bit. A Saturn, another sort of distortion plugin. A sidechain compressor just with the Pro C, just putting the attack and release all the way down. And sidechain is set to the dropkick and just acts as a sidechain compressor. There's a Pro Q2 that's yet again smoothing the sound a little bit, and there's a Pro L that's limiting the sub bass, so nothing goes above a certain threshold basically. So the MIDI is actually also very interesting. It's a very playful sub bass. It jumps in octaves and it does certain pitch stop effects, just like right here. So it pitches down, right here pitches up again, and then right here I do another like higher octave range sub bass. Then for the main bass, we have this layer. We're going to start off with the first bass, which is a serum patch, and this is the Oddcube Reese bass preset. Just a super dark Reese bass that really gives the body to the overall bass group. This is the second bass. It's a brass hit, I think, from the Fabian Mazur Elixir pack. And basically, I use Serum as a sampler instrument here. If you don't know how to use Serum as a sampler instrument, basically, the noise oscillator is your sampler. So you can literally drag any sample in and use it as a sampler. Then we have this one. Another brass hit from Quicks, yet again using Serum as a sampler in this one. This is the next one. This is there's a similar brass hit, I think, in my Splice pack, Volume 1. Basically, it's like a very Serum-made brass hit, and it fills up the spectrum a lot, actually. On this, there's a hyperdimension, a compressor, and a filter. And there's an EQ, yet again smoothing the sound a little bit. And there's another EQ controlling the highs and the lows. And the next sound is this one. This is from Snareskin, actually. I I think he gave this to me for one of our collabs. It's a very like guitar-driven, distorted bass, and yet again using Serum as a sampler. And the last sound is this one. This is another bass from my song Medusa with that behavior, and this is a very organic bass because it moves. As you see, the oscillator is continuously moving, and that makes the whole bass also not like basic, you know, like it sounds like the bass is talking in a way. And also on this there is a another EQ just like balancing the bass a little bit and cutting out all the low end in this one, so it's purely the high end and the white noise of this sound that is active in this layer. And if you put everything together, you have this layer. And without all the effects, it sounds like this. So pretty basic. So what I added on the group was a camel crusher, an EQ that's cutting out all the low end and boosting a bit of the high end. There is another Saturn. I chose the preset more exciting. A lot of the times I tend to lose high end in my basses or in like certain sounds, and the more exciting preset from Saturn really complements that with even more high end. Then there is a Pro MB that's compressing the high end, especially because you don't want the bass to be too prominent in the mix. So you want to kind of compress the high end a little bit with a multiband compressor. And as you see here, there are two areas that I compress around the 2600 hertz and around the 8700 hertz. There's another EQ cutting out all the low end just to make sure that nothing is interfering with the sub bass, and there is a sidechain compressor. Then we have these chords. And the chords are Serum, and basically they are just super saw layers. And we have a hyperdimension, a phaser effect, and a reverb that's basically making the sound a bit bigger. There's an EQ, there's a compressor, there is a tape delay that adds a little bit of spice to the super saw. There is OTT that is really making, basically compressing all the frequencies in the sound. I put the depth to 40% times 78% and kind of boosted the mids in the super saws. And there is another sidechain compressor. And then we have an arpeggiator. Very fast one, a kind of like weird arpeggiator, but it works in the track. It's a Silent preset Stereo Arena 01. No idea where this comes from. Almost like a Game Boy sort of ARP. Same preset, like the same effects as in the super saw layer. Literally EQ, compressor, tape delay, OTT. It's even the same settings, and the sidechain compressor. Okay, so those are the synths in the drop. Then I want to go back up and I want to show you guys the vocal ambient loop that I made for the drop. Okay, so this is actually a very, very, very dope part of the track. In my opinion, actually, my favorite part of the track. There is an acoustic version of some vocalist that did a version of Cinema. And basically what we did is we dragged, or we downloaded the video to through like a YouTube to MP3 converter. And then we dragged it in RX7 and we isolated the vocal. What I did is, for the first couple of hits, I really wanted it to make it a lot more distorted and a lot more saturated. So, sorry. So for the first hit, we have this. And all I did is I added a camel crusher that's really like just distorting the crap out of it. There is an EQ that's removing all the low end, a little bit of the high end, and boosting the like the main root note of the vocal. There is a wider effect that makes it a lot wider. Yeah, just a lot wider in the mix. There is an OTT. There is a sidechain compressor and an S1 imager to make it a little bit more mono in the mix. So it's not like interfering with the super saws or the other vocal elements in the track. And then later we have this part. Literally what it is another Saturn. Back in the day, it's a preset that is, I think, in Crunchy. Yeah, back in the day. Very nice distortion preset. Yet again, EQ'd it, OTT, and another sidechain compressor. And really gives like a great addition to the track. I'll play it with the bass in a second. Also this part. Just overall really great melodies. And if I'm going to play it with the bass, you'll see what I mean. Just to fill up the frequency spectrum and the melodic spectrum, basically. And then we move on to, I think, just the effects. Another really main element of the track. This is just white noise mixed with the crowd cheers from the Cashmere Pack. EQ, just cutting out all the low end, sidechain compressor, and another OTT. I literally put OTT on everything, I noticed, because I feel like OTT is like really making the sound a lot more thicker and a lot more well compressed in the mix. So that is something I do a lot. Other than that, there's like these little vocal chant effects. And then for the second part of the drop, there is this Hex Cougar riser. Yet again, these elements really accelerate the drop and make it a lot more uplifting, basically. This is, let me see, Hex Cougar FX Loop Hype Riser. Really, really great riser, actually. Then we move on to the main part of the drop, which is the vocal chop.
You are a cinema. I could watch it forever.
To be honest, I think this part took me like a few days before I really had the vocal chop I wanted to use for the drop. And it's honestly very complicated. But I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can. So we have two layers, actually. This is the main layer.
You are a cinema.
On this vocal effect, there is a little altar boy that doesn't do anything. There is an EQ that's removing all the low end and boosting a little bit of the high mid range. There is a supercharger that is compressing it a lot and adds like a really nice saturation effect and character to it. Then we have the Isotope Trash plugin, and I use the preset Clip Control. And this just adds a sort of saturation compressor effect to it and just makes it a lot thicker, to be honest. There is another EQ cutting out all the low end. There is a Solid Dynamics plugin that's compressing everything. I use the preset Cranked. There is a Serum effect, and I use the Hyperdimension and the Flanger effect for the vocal. There's another EQ that's cutting out all the low end, because if you add compression, distortion, and the serum effects, it's going to continuously add more low end to your sound. So again, cutting it out with an EQ. And I use the Arts Acoustic Reverb to automate the reverb in the vocal chop. So those are the effects. And then as far as like the cuts go and the chops, so for this part, I use the cinema, the part, and I made my own melody with it. So right here, I think, yeah, it goes +1. And then we have the I could watch you forever.
I could watch you for.
And the second layer to support the first layer is Chris Jobe singing the vocal in an octave lower.
You are a cinema. I could watch you forever.
But on its own, it sounds maybe kind of funny, but together it really thickens the sound a lot, actually. And for the lower one, literally the same effects. The only difference is there is no trash, and there is no set turn, and there is no little altar boy. Because these background layers shouldn't have a lot of distortion. You know, you kind of want to support the first layer, but not overrule it, if that makes sense. So then for this part, just the same effects, it's just chopping it up a little bit. Also for this, I have no idea what this is. This is like another part that I just stretched, I think. It's just, I don't even know what I did there. It's just another part that I took, distorted the crap out of it, and then used it as a melodic rhythm, like melodic percussion element, almost. And then this next part is actually really cool. This first element is the same sound as before, but I added a lot more reverb and a tremolo effect acting as a auto pen filter. So you go from really fast to really slow. And then this next part is actually what makes the whole drop like glued together. This is actually serum, but yet again I use it as a sampler instrument. So without any effects, it sounds like this. It's a one shot of Chris Jobe's vocal, distorted, and now it just acts like a synthesizer basically. And what I turned on is the portamento function, so it's on mono, legato, and the portamento is like kind of like halfway. On this, there are all the other elements that we added in the other vocal chop, and there is the only difference is that the Arts Acoustic Reverb is being automated. So you go from a very loud reverb that's being cut off right at the end. And that's basically it, I think. Let me see. There's a tremolo rate, but that's off, so it doesn't really work. I don't think I missed anything. I've explained the drop. There is like the main pluck from the break. And I think that's basically it. So the second drop is basically the same as the first one, so I don't really feel the need to explain that. But we also have the outro. So I think the outro is another one of my favorite parts of the track, to be honest. It's like so emotional, and the chords work very well with the vocal chop and Chris Jobe's ending vocal. So I think we're just gonna start off with the main piano, which sounds like this. So for the piano, I used Contact. It's literally, yet again, the same piano I used for all my other songs. There's an EQ on this, a 1-knob brighter, a compressor that's kind of like compressing the attack of the piano. There is a filter, and there's an arts acoustic reverb that is being automated at the end right here. To support the piano, I use a Reese bass. And then in the outro, I use these vocal chops. And we have these effects. And another vocal from Jobe. And on this, there's an EQ, a very big reverb. There's a tape delay that's adding a lot more delay to the sound. And there is a tremolo effect, which basically acts as a panner for the sound to go from left to right. Just overall works very nice, and it really complements the well, it really just adds a great ending to the story. And that's what me and Oddcube do every time for our tracks, is we make sure that it's a story from the beginning till the end. And for the outro, using like a really cool piano and ending with vocals and vocal chops just really just end the story, you know? It would be weird if you have like such an energetic drop and then just like end it. Like, oh, well, that's it, you know? So it's always great to kind of, end it in a nice way. Other than that, I think that's basically it for the track. I explained the drop, the outro. So yes, I think that's it. So yeah, but anyways, that's basically it for this video. I hope this was useful. Be sure to subscribe to Oddcube's page. He's going to do a lot more tutorials in the future. So make sure to subscribe and follow him. I will be doing a lot more tutorials in the future as well, a lot more videos. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll catch you guys very soon with a new video. Peace.